beliefs and what I found is really beauty in tradition and rituals.
I needed to also supplement with a larger concept of my higher power. And by layering this spiritual journey alongside my religious journey, I found that it empowered me to lean into being independent, to breaking free of systems that no longer served me, because I had such a deep belief in a higher power that would support me. So I love that we have a variety of experiences represented here on stage and in our audience. Chief Phil Lane, I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and your journey as well.
Mitakiapi, my very, very beloved relatives of our human family, want to extend a very warm and loving handshake and embrace to each and every one of you as we complete our first National Independent Convention.
Woo!
As we begin to move forward as prophesied by indigenous people across the Americas to a new global civilization based in justice. Based in justice for every human being who our indigenous people believe at conception are born as sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. I was born at Haskell Indian boarding school. My mother, member of the Chickasaw Nation, which I'm also a member of, was sent there when she was 13. My dad was sent there when he was 12. The Yahantuwa Nation. My dad was 17 when he saw my mother come to that residential school, and he said, at Indian boarding school, he said, "Son," he said, "I saw her." He said, "That's the woman I'm marrying." So 10 years later, during World War II, my father was in the military. Obviously, he wasn't in the military all the time because I was born 9 months after he came and married my mother. But my grandmother and my auntie worked there at that boarding school. It was indigenous leaders, children's from all over the United States, who they brought there to try to civilize us. Of course, that didn't work. And in fact, that's where we made unity. Because many of the people I've worked with over the last 70 years, and even before that when I met them, were people who went to school with my parents. But on my father's side, my great-grandfather, Tipi Sapa, Philip Deloria, was a hereditary chief. He held his chieftainship even though he became an Anglican minister. So if you go to the National Cathedral, you see the Saints of the Ages there in Washington, D.C. He's the third one from the right. That's who raised my dad, because my grandmother died from tuberculosis. My grandfather died from alcoholism. On my mom's side, my great-grandfather, John Wesley Parker, head of the Full Blood Party that fought during World War II against slavery. And so they've had a big influence on me. I also have, as you can seeing me, there's not all Chickasaws and Dakotas here. I didn't get a chance to meet those relatives, but there's some French, Irish, and English, and I always wondered how in the hell that happened, how they get together. Well, as growing up, I really believe each of us is born as sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, everlasting, pure heart. And as I began to go through living in my personal boarding school, because I really believe, I'm going to say this, first of all, I think we have to define religion. Religion means, in its Latin root, to bring together, to bind together, to unite. And from my perspective, it doesn't do that, it's better without it. That's the reason I don't use the word religion, even though I believe in religion. I use spirituality simply the word's been so abused. The same thing, I don't use the word Christianity when I see the incredible genocide that occurred across this world through the papal bulls of 1453 to 1493. I call it churchianity, because I know Lord Jesus Christ would never, ever treat human beings in this manner, ever. At the same time, as I was growing up, of course, I was full of rage and anger. Sexually abused when I was 12 by this older white young man who he, for some reason, I guess culturally different. You know, I had kind of that kind of abuse. Of course, my mom and dad, their own intergenerational trauma. And then when you're lighter complected, you get it from both sides. Oh, you know, you couldn't be Indian. Or, oh, what do you mean? Anyway, what it comes down to, and I'm not saying that's every case, I was full of hatred and rage. Even though I've been raised in this very religious, spiritual family, I was full of anger and rage. And it drove me in athletics. Every match, wrestling match I went in, I think that was George Armstrong Custer across me, and I wanted to hurt him. I mean, truly, hurt him. It's not a good way to be. I played football. It's like playing against the 7th Cavalry, and the harder I could hit them, the better. But you can only carry that hatred and anger and rage so far. It kills you. So in 1967, in this March 21st, in the beginning of spring, I had this spiritual experience. And during the next 9 months, I went through this, it was like these layers of alcoholism and drug abuse and unhealthy relationships and all those kind of things kind of fell away. Now, by now, I can certainly tell you I'm no saint. Because I think we have many spiritual rebirths. Many. Yeah. Many. You know, we just like a religion. This incredible spring comes. The teachings come. People are inspired. The summer comes. It gets very, beginning to get away from the light a little bit. Then comes the fall. The spirit begins to leave. And instead of having that spiritual feeling, it gets up here. Like this elder told me, the longest road you'll ever have to walk in your life is from here to here. Because this is where the soul, the spirit is, and the heart, and the mind. It's good. It's a gift too. But for every problem the intellect solves, as one elder told me, don't depend on it to solve your problem, because for every problem it solves, it creates 10 more. You got to open your heart. Well, anyway, that's from that time. I guess that was this. Wow, that's been over 52 years ago. I've been on this path to unify the indigenous people of the Americas, as prophesied by our indigenous peoples, as, by the way, moving towards this new global civilization, which I'm sure you would agree in the Lord's Prayer. What does it say? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. On earth. But I can also go to the Buddhist, to the Baha'i, to the Muslim. I've read all the spiritual faiths, and I can tell you, the spiritual foundation is one.
That's it.
One. And when you begin to see what these religious wars have done to us, it makes me sick. So what I'm saying, I believe in religious freedom. But that also means now I don't believe in the religious freedom that sacrifices children. But if any faith, to me, that teaches love, kindness, respect, forgiveness, compassion, humility, to me, that is one of the two most best things. We haven't been talked to. Anyway, I just wanted to say that the two most powerful, potent forces in our whole human history that's brought us along, one is science and one is religion in its truest form, spirituality. But religion without reason becomes fanaticism. Fanaticism. No different that religion in its truest meaning, to unite, to bind together, not to fight each other, or spirituality without, spirituality becomes a Frankenstein. Science without spirituality doesn't Frankenstein Scooby.
Yes.
And so the true reality is they both are gifts from the Creator of all good things. That's why I hear these talks about technology. I can take a hammer and I can build a beautiful building. But I can take a hammer and kill people. As we see these crazy things happening in our streets today, where people stabbing each other and doing this kind of thing. So I believe you have to have both. We are spiritual beings as well as physical beings. In fact, the foundation of all is our soul, which has no ethnicity, has no gender, has no class, has no whatever. It's a fraction of the oneness of our Creator, which makes every form of prejudice intolerable and unacceptable.
Yes.
Close it. I think I gotta get
Well, and Chief, I'd say that you can
preach too. So.
yes, you can preach too. I think that each of you have touched on some really powerful themes that are central to the conversations we've had over the last 3 days. One of sovereignty, or a sense of agency. Recognizing that the challenges throughout history around religion and spirituality have been the result of man, not of a God or a higher power. And I want to lean into that in the concept, through the lens of religious freedom and religious tolerance, and creating the future, the nation, the country that we hope to see. So when our founding fathers, launched our nation, it was with this understanding that there would be a deep separation of church and state. That what humans touch becomes fallible. And that in creating that very distinct separation between the state, the church, and let's say religious or spirituality, they were trying to keep the human hands off that experience, recognizing that each individual had a sense of agency in how they might practice, a sense of sovereignty in how they choose to practice. And I see this coming up in conversations today, and I have to share that it shocks me that it seems that we're trying to lean into marrying religion with our practice of government around one religion, and maybe not one religion, but Judeo-Christianity. And even as a Catholic, as a Christian, I shudder at that thought, because I understand how humans can destroy the religious and the spiritual experience. So when we think about the separation of church and state, and how religion and spirituality has powered our individual journeys to overcome adverse childhood experiences, to become sovereign leaders in our communities, what are your thoughts on the separation of church and state?
Well, let me just address that real quickly. First of all, we have to, again, things always come down to definitions. And number one, there's religions. One of the things that I believe passionately, and I've spent my entire adult life studying both the good and the bad and the ugly of my own faith, the history of Christianity, and it is about relationship. And Christ came to break down the wall that had been erected between man and God because of our own sin. And if anybody thinks they're perfect, try walking on water. I tried, it doesn't work. Right? There's only one who's ever done that. The fact of the matter is that when he promised that in him we become a new creation, what that means is this isn't just a belief system. We all have to have that. We all can make belief systems, but the genesis of this begins with the fact that we are really a three-part person. There is spiritual. We are a spirit with a soul in a body. Mm-hmm. What you see isn't me. Okay, this is going to go away. When we celebrate the life of my little grandson this week, as all of us have said goodbyes to that body, that doesn't mean that we're going to be saying goodbye forever to that person. He's not dead. He's just alive in a different place. Mm-hmm. That's what I believe now. Yes. And I believe that because I've witnessed the fruits of that. One of the things Jesus taught was, he said, you shall know them by their fruits. Mm-hmm. If you plant figs, you get figs. If you plant rocks, you get nothing except for rocks in the ground, right? I say, so what does the fruit of your life look like? And one of the things we have to be intellectually and spiritually honest enough is to say, is my belief system producing good fruit, bad fruit? How do I even define what that is? Who says? Is it your opinion or is it my opinion? How do we decide? Because we all have opinions, so what if we have 350 million different opinions in this country, 350 million different religions? We all decide on our own. Now, I would call that pure, unadulterated, absolute anarchy that would devolve into chaos at its worst order and dissolution of our civilization. Our founding fathers believed not in separation of religion and government, they believed in separation of the institutions. And you can study this yourself. I've studied extensively for 35 years. And you can read the founding fathers' writings from beginning to end. But you go back to 1607, and these are historical facts. These are not speculations or our own opinions, that when the first boat of those landed at Jamestown colony in Virginia, the first act they did, Reverend Robert Hunt planted a cross in the sand and prayed over this new land. Now, unfortunately, greed and avarice have which reside in the hearts of men, made a huge impact on what happened, some subsequent decisions after this along the way. What's interesting to me is what the Bible teaches is there's one loving creator who created us in his likeness. We have the divine stamp in who we are. And by the way, it's not how we look, because I wish you'd done a better job with me if it was going to be that. So it's our spiritual being, who we are, is divine in his image. So because of that, every person, every life, and I happen to believe when that conception occurs, that life begins, and you don't interrupt it, it becomes a life.
It was God calling.
In Texas, that's a local call. And that's what I was told when I moved here, right? And so in essence, so here's the thing: your faith is personal, and that relationship to you and God is personal. But what that means is, as a citizen, and this is part of what I struggled with, Lauren, when I entered the church, was I was told, leave your citizenship out on the lawn. Okay, when you come into this, it's just church. Okay, we do church. We do this over here. You leave that over there. I came into this believing that I was supposed to give all of me to Him. That when I entered in a relationship with God, and He promised me eternal life, that I give Him my life, and that meant as a husband, as a father, as a man, as a businessman, whatever I did. In fact, the Word says, whatever you do, in word or in deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So that's what I thought. But so here's where our founding father, remember these three words, we the people? Those that first part of the preamble of what we call our Constitution. Because what happened at that moment in history, and this is a fascinating study because we're unique in this country. We really have to understand the depth of that. That through all of history, the singular centralization of all earthly power is the norm, not the exception. Kings, tyrants, emperors, totalitarian governments all seek to centralize power. The fact of the matter is, our view is because from the very beginning, there was one who created us in His image who said, you take charge of this, and you take care of this. I'm giving you as the steward of my creation here, take care of it. And we were able to do that until we messed it up. But along the way, there's one who has been the enemy, who's from the very beginning said, don't listen to God. He just wants you to be like Him. He comes, and Word says, to steal, kill, and destroy. This cosmic battle between good and evil, we call God and Satan, has existed from the dawn of time. And the one who wants to centralize all power to control everyone, I believe, is the one who we would call Satan or Lucifer. There's a power who's trying to do that on earth, but we had self-government. In our history of Western civilization, go back to ancient Israel, they were self-governing, but then they decided, and this goes back to 1 Samuel, they said, we want a king. We're tired of this. We want somebody to take care of us. And they said, we want a king. And God told the prophet, He says, they're not rejecting you as their judge. They're rejecting me as their king. Go read this. So that centralized power, when you look, then fast forward throughout history, what our founding fathers did, and Samuel Adams, who's known as the father of the American Revolution, said this: This day, when we signed the Declaration of Independence, we unkinged the king. We said, no more king. It's going to be we the people under God to direct ourselves and then work together from there. And that means the people are in charge, but our faith can't be separate from who we are in how we govern.
Yes.
Just the institutions are different.
And Dave, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that you, as both a deeply religious and spiritual individual who has studied history, we can say that these themes of good and evil, of centralized versus decentralized power, are universal across all of the major world religions. It is not central to just one lens of Judeo-Christianity. We see these themes, very much in the Native American stories, very much in, the stories of ayahuasca ceremonies and in Hinduism and in Buddhism, that empowering people to have the agency, to have sovereignty over their own lives. It is not universal. It is universal. It is not unique to one faith. And I think that is the beauty of religious freedom, that we empower everyone to lean into those belief systems with the understanding that we share in that universal truth. That there is a concept of good, a concept of evil, that moral relativism has no place in this conversation, that we as moral and spiritual and universal creatures have found commonalities that we can agree upon. And that isn't defined by the religious path that you choose. We respect each path. And that means protecting those rights for each other and holding space for each other. Chief Phil Lane, I'd love for you to share your thoughts. We'll switch there. And then, we're going to wrap up in order to be respectful of individuals' time. And I want to encourage everyone to continue these conversations. We'll have Chief Phil Lane share his thoughts on religious freedom in our nation. And then we want to engage with each of you.
I want to say with great love and respect that we have to remember that the U.S. Constitution was directly drawn from the great law of the peacemaker of the Iroquois Confederacy. In fact, George Washington and many of those, a number of the key people who wrote the Declaration spoke Mohawk. And these were all Christian male landowners who were Protestants. That's it. So we've got to also look at how they were thinking as all Protestant male landowners. Nobody else was included in the circle. And yet, we know that this whole concept that they drew directly from the Iroquois in order to form an even better union in the Iroquois, that is powerful. Powerful. But there's two, from my perspective, major flaws. One, women were not included as the Iroquois included them as the wisdom. So I'd say that the eagle has two wings, equal wings, or the quetzal, or the hummingbird. One is man and one is woman. And both of them have to have equal power, respect, and honor. And any faith upon this Mother Earth that teaches that women are less than men, from my perspective, that's out of order. And we're not going to find unity. Because until women have full honor and respect, and by the way, I think we have to also go beyond this thing of all these labels. Because if you really think about it, there's a whole spectrum of spiritual qualities that we have, as infinite spiritual qualities. Some cultures define what's feminine very different than other cultures. Some cultures define what's masculine is very different than other cultures. I believe a fully actualized human being has all those spiritual qualities. And I can tell you, hitting about 80, I know it's nothing about growing my earth suit. I'm about 2 inches shorter. My plumbing's kind of not working so good. And of course, I used to have black curly hair. But I believe that the soul, as I said before, has no gender, has no class, has no ethnicity, has none of this. The soul is a reflection of the oneness of our Creator. I also believe the soul, every essential part of our being as we carry on the spiritual worlds, our intellect, our creativity, our memory, are all property of the soul, not the body. And from our teachings, I don't know how I'm on this, but that that we should seek the light, we shouldn't care about what the lamp looks like. Because I sat here as a little boy, and by the way, I'm a very religious family, on what I call people who truly lived as a Christian, and they loved and respect every human being. Nobody came to our house. I don't care how they looked, where they came from, what color they were not given a nice cup of coffee or whatever when they stepped in our door. To me, that's the pure essence of any spiritual faith upon Mother Earth. And until from my perspective, the religions of Mother Earth come together and really come to a unity, a respect to one another. But it's not going to come from, I believe, from the outer dimensions of religion. It's got to come from the values. I know my brother here, if I said, brother, you believe in love? Yeah. You believe in integrity?
Yeah.
You believe in humility?
Yes.
You believe in compassion?
Yes.
You believe in serving, being a servant to the people?
Yes.
I'm sure he's going to agree. I'm sure we're all going to agree. That's the dimension we have to get down to, and I think I'm going to add this last part. And that kind of connect two concepts. One is the prior unity and oneness of our human family and all life. And the hurt of one is the hurt of all, and the honor of one is the honor of all. What I'm saying is, just like the baby in the mother's womb, when it's conceived, goes through all kinds of shapes and forms before, as it's growing its earth suit, our earth suit. All kinds of shapes and forms. Looks like all kinds of different things. We have been one from the very beginning. I don't believe we descended. By the way, descending means going down. I don't think we ascended or descended from anybody but ourselves. I believe we were conceived in this physical world in time and space, each of us collectively and individually, a sovereignty, ancient and perishable and everlasting. And I believe that every spiritual faith that teaches love, kindness, respect, forgiveness, compassion should be honored and respected. That doesn't mean I have to believe in all the ideology. That doesn't mean I have to spew hatred against them.
Correct.
That has nothing to do so much to do with the teachings I know, the Christian teachings I know. But I sat here, you can imagine, why in the world would the Creator have me wait, a beloved member of the human family, for 2,000 years to give me the full spiritual truth? I never figured that out. I still haven't.
Well, I'd say, Chief.
Last thing, but there's spiritual teachers all across the Americas, White Buffalo Catholic, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, who brought these same spiritual teachings as Jesus, Muhammad, Baha'u'llah, all. Thank you.
I think you look pretty good for 2,000 years old.
Yes. I want everyone to take a moment after we conclude to think about how your religious or spiritual journey has maybe informed your political ideology. It was very intentional that we created space for conversations around religion and spirituality, recognizing that we are very multidimensional humans, and that as we are all political, we are also all spiritual creatures as well. So creating space for these conversations was very intentional and integral as we think about an independent movement.
Do you think we could have a close of prayer? I mean, this is all supposed to be about spirituality, religion. We never